Hello, bonjour, and welcome to your new wine video. I'm your host, Julien, and today we are continuing our exploration of what happens to wine as it ages inside a bottle. And that's while you store it in your cellar, in your wine fridge, or in a cupboard. This is part 2 of a 3-part series on this topic on aging, the aging of wine. Last week in part 1, we looked at which type of wine you should age or not. And next week in part 3, we will consider the storage conditions and the lengths of storage that you should adopt. But today let's consider the 3 main things that happen to wine as it evolves and changes over time. These are all related to some chemical reactions naturally occurring inside a bottle of wine. But as always, I'll keep things simple, not too chemical, not too scientific, breaking things down into small chapters for you. Let's go! My fellow wine-loving friends, Julien here. Before we get started with the video, there is something that you have to know about. This video was made possible by the Bonner Private Wine Partnership, and the reason I work with them is not just because it's been called the most unique wine club in America, but because they truly love the wines that they choose for you. Founded by Will Bonner, the partnership is a small group of wine lovers who have come together to import excellent small batch wines that might otherwise get completely overlooked by large importers. They get them. Right now you can get your hands on 3 rare extreme altitude red wines from Argentina, from some of the purest, highest vineyards in the entire world, way up in the Andes Mountains. No middlemen, no additive packed supermarket wines here, no inflated cost. Plus you'll get exclusive access to more wine education videos from me, just like the one you're about to watch, to make sure you become an educated wine connoisseur. So make sure to check out the link in the video description to see if you want to become partner in something truly special in the world of wine. But for now, back to your video. First of all, let's say that wine is pretty stable a product. As we saw last week in our last video, most wines, whatever their price and quality level, will withstand 2 or 3 years of aging without degrading all that much. And when you think about it, well, not many food products achieve this unless they are heavily processed or cooked or dried or frozen. Wine, in the contrary, is a relatively fresh produce. At the end of the day, simply fermented grape juice. So it's quite remarkable that it captures the essence of grapes and preserves it in such a fashion. But we talk about this a lot more as the video develops, and especially when we talk about aromas. For now, let's talk about the first point of wine's evolution, the texture. And this is mainly going to concern the red wines. Yes, red wines. Generally speaking, red wines get smoother and rounder and more mellowed to the palate as they age, as they get older. And that's in fact one of the main reasons we age wine in the first place, because we often like wine that are smooth and mild rather than the aggressive ones to the taste. What happens here is that the tannins that are inside red wine, tannins are these large antioxidant molecules that give wine its astringency. Astringency is the wine's drying sensation that you can feel on your palate, in your mouth, and that you find more specifically into red wines. Well, those tannins, over time with aging, they start agglomerating. Essentially, they stick to each other, forming larger and larger molecules that feel rounder and softer to our taste buds when they're large. Once some of these tannins get too big, well, they can't stay in suspension inside the wine, so they start precipitating at the bottom of the bottle, forming those dark sediments, well, not in a bottle of white wines, but those dark sediments that you sometimes find in old bottles of red wines. These exact sediments that we want to eliminate through decanting. And you would remember that I made that video about how and why we decant wine, and you can watch it for more information on that. But let's stick to our tannins, because in old wines the tannins are less aggressive and there is less of them, as we've just seen. Well, the beverage gets essentially softer and gentler. I find it very interesting to think that a little bit like people, where wines start their life full of somewhat uncontrolled energy, and they can be a little bit aggressive when they're young, but then they better and they get more civilized and polite with age. It's even more fascinating if you consider that young vines will give more astringent wines than old vines as well. And old vines will deliver rounder texture and rounder tannin. But that's a story for another day. To some extent, white wines and rosés will know a little bit of a similar fate. They will get a little softer and a little rounder because they also contain small amounts of tannins that we call, when we talk about rosés and whites, we call them phenolics. Now, the color of wine comes from molecules that are chemically quite close to the tannins. So the color of wine, as you've probably noticed, also evolves with age. Let's see how. So the young red wines generally have a bright and vibrant red color with often hues of blue in them, making them look dark and purple, just like this one, rather than just red. Now, with age, this color lightens as the sum of the color precipitates again together with the tannins, and the red color evolves towards featuring more orange hues to become eventually light brown. If you see a red wine with a lot of yellow, a lot of orange, or a lot of brown, especially to the rim, so that's the side of the wine. When you look at a wine, look at the side, and we call this the rim. Well, it's probably going to be a wine that has evolved, that is aged, and it's probably going to be time to drink it. Now, let's have a look at the color of white wines. Well, it will also evolve from a bright lemon yellow color, and sometimes young wine has hints and hues of green into them, towards some oxidation, so towards some age, with hues of amber, hues of gold, and eventually a brown color. Then the rosés, as we've seen, well, most rosés aren't really meant to be aged, so let's not bother talking about them all that much. Now, finally, after the evolution of the tannins and the color, well, the third and most important aspect of wine aging is the evolution, obviously, of its aromas and flavors over time. Let's have a look at that. Essentially, wines taste mainly of the grapes they were made from when they're young. A young wine tastes, say, almost like fresh grapes. Of course, with few extra layers of flavors from the fermentation and sometimes from the oak if it's been matured in oak barrel, but not a whole lot more. This is why if you smell and taste a young wine, well, you will experience primarily flavors of fruit, some vegetal characters, and sometimes a bit of spices from the oak. As wine ages, though, the 1000 plus aromatic molecules that compose a wine's aromatic profile, while they chemically react with each other to form other molecules that are completely different and that smell and taste completely different. So typically with age, red wines will acquire notes that are described as more animal characters, such as the leather, the fur or horse staple. Those are some classic descriptors. They will also develop earthy notes such as the classic truffle or forest floor, especially the Pinot Noir. Those are very common components of old Pinot Noir, and all of those compose a wine's bouquet. Now, white wines will evolve from fresh aromas of fruit, such as the apricot and the pear, the apple, to more intense, sometimes heavier traits, such as honey, beeswax, or even curry paste when they age. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, all these chemical evolutions happen remarkably slowly in wine. Although this will depend on the storage conditions and mostly the storage temperature. Every chemical reaction happens faster when it's warm, and it's pretty warm today. But if you age your wine for too long, well, it simply won't be as enjoyable, and it will lose all the fruity freshness, the grape freshness that we also love to enjoy when we taste wine. One of the wonders of wine, though, is that every wine almost every bottle reaches a peak of quality in its life cycle, which makes it very exciting not only to find a good bottle of wine, but also the perfect moment to drink it. And that's exactly what we will be discussing next in our next video: how to store your wine properly and how to find that sweet spot when a wine has reached exactly its full potential. For the time being, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon in the wonderful world of wine. Cheers, santé.